Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Thursday already. It's been a huge week in the world of Celtic, and I'm delighted to be sharing the next hour to discuss some of that, as much as we can, with John Paul Mason. But before we get into anything, tell me about that retro flag behind you. There is no green screen. That is the real deal.
Get the hats, scarves, badge, and the tapes. And the flags.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a 24-year-old relic that I kind of knew I had. And I was looking for it last week, actually. And maybe it wasn't the right time to bring it out last week because maybe you'd be getting ahead of yourself after a 4-0 win against Falkirk, which I guess was to be expected. And I don't think many people expected what happened on Sunday to happen, but just purely because we've been starved of it for a while, even despite the success, despite the league title last season, the League Cup last season, it felt like a long time since we'd done that to them, and it felt like a long time since we'd really gone at them and put the wind up them, and we did that from minute one. I was actually watching the first half back this morning until it turned to German commentary. I found a video online on Daily Motion, and it was like the first half, right. And I was like, I'll just watch this, and then bizarrely it just paused, and then the commentary changed to German commentary.
Was it 20 minutes? 20 minutes in, did that happen, right?
Aye.
So was it Celtic TV commentary up to that point?
No, it was Premier Sports.
Premier, right, okay.
Like somebody just uploaded it, so it was interesting to hear Michael Stewart's take on the offside goal, which seems to have been completely forgotten about, and as well as some other things that have been forgotten about since Sunday due to one incident in particular. But yeah, a very enjoyable game, and I had good vibes about it. I met Yogi on the way in. I've never met him before, so it was nice to put a real face to a name. So we had a quick chat just before. He was going one way, I was going the other. I was going down to G, and he was going around the other way. So it was really nice to meet him in person because, you don't get the opportunity to do that often. Just like I met Jim Orr in person on Friday, although Jim Orr and I have met before, but it was nice to kind of spend some time with him on Friday.
Let's start with Friday then. Friday. No, you're right. Because again, when it comes to contributors on A Celtic State of Mind, we're international and continental, and we do come from all over the globe, really, if you look at all the contributors. But on Friday night, yourself, me, Colin Watt, and Jim Orr were all in the same room. But
compare extraordinaire, Colin Watt.
Oh, yeah. You see, it's so natural to him. It's so natural to him on that stage. Green CSC, what a club, isn't it? It's a brilliant club.
Amazing. I'm so glad I came down, just I didn't have anything on. Maybe in other years on Halloween, I might have been like DJing or something like that. It's usually a great night to do a DJ set somewhere, and maybe with a bit of better organisation, I would have done that. But I found myself at a loose end and a surprising short distance from Glasgow to Greenock. I don't think, for some reason, I thought Greenock was further away from Glasgow than it actually is, but it's only a half hour on the train.
But then going back, it was longer because I took you on a magical mystery tour. I'm not quite sure where we ended up, JP, but we got there in the end.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't averse to that with Raymond Borland soundtracking us most of the way with his road trip in America with Brian Cannon, which was actually really good to hear. But yeah, Greenock CSC, great spot. I've driven past it a few times, and people have mentioned it to me, and I was aware of it. I know that it was purpose built, as a Celtic supporters club, which is quite something in itself. And it's just a really good vibe. It kind of reminded me a bit of the Brudenell Social Club in Leeds, but for Celtic. Brudenell Social Club's a music venue in Leeds, which is a great venue if anyone ever is in that neck of the woods and fancies going to a gig. Great place. But I had that kind of community aspect of it, the bar downstairs. People could still go in and have a drink on a Friday night in the bar, even if they weren't at the event. And then you go upstairs and walk straight into a full house of an event with Chris Sutton. And like you said, despite him not feeling that well, and you could tell that, when he was in the green room and stuff, he was definitely absolutely loaded. But I thought he was brilliant, and it was great to hear him in that kind of setting.
It was. I was going to ask you about your experience of spending a wee bit of time with Chris. As you said, he wasn't 100% fit on the night. We were talking about the fact, actually, that it was on the same night, Halloween, that he scored a couple of goals against Juve in that 4-3 game, one of his finest, for me, performances in a Celtic jersey. So we spoke about all that and more. Chris is not a caricature on the television, is he, JP? He is the same in real life. He's not putting on any act.
Absolutely, exactly the same. We were talking about, I mentioned to him about being in Amsterdam because he spoke about the night that Celtic beat Ajax in Amsterdam, and I said to him, got to say to him in person, I was like, your header's still one of my favourite Celtic goals of all time. Like I think it will always be in my top 10. I can't see it being shoved out of my top 10 at any point, because it's just to have actually been there in the stadium. And I was hearing Paddy Sinnott talking about this yesterday, where he was saying the 90s for me was just Europe was a non-event. There was nothing happening for us in Europe in the 90s, and even the idea of playing in the Champions League was fanciful. So to actually be in the stadium, and witness it happening in front of my eyes, and seeing him score that goal was tremendous. And as much as he was slagging Bobby Petr scored that night as well. So and then I shamefully had my green and whitewash DVD with me to get signed, which he duly did. Did I put it back down there? I can't see it. It's somewhere, but I signed it anyway, and I said, "Oh, by the way, I'll never forget that game," because the front cover of the green and whitewash is him celebrating after the chip. And I don't know why, but I was sitting in a different seat that day, and I was sitting sort of in the corner, basically where the Green Brigade are now. That was almost exactly where I was sitting. So I was a lot closer to the Rangers fans than normal. And they, I can't remember what minute it was, if it was 88th, 89th minute or whatever, and they're absolutely up, giving it loudly, celebrating the fact that we weren't beating them for the last game. So they were actually going to stop the rot, so to speak. So they're all up singing, and he just did that dink, and he just sat them all down. I said, "You just sat down an entire end," and he was just like smiling, loving it.
He knows what he contributed. I love the fact that you get players. I think John Hartson falls into this category where they've had careers at sometimes big clubs, or really, really good careers elsewhere. So Chris Sutton, for example, Norwich. You spoke about that. They were actually going for the Premier League one season. They had a tremendous run in Europe. You'll remember the Jeremy Goss goal against Bayern Munich. Everybody remembers that. He ended up at Hearts, Jeremy Goss. So he had a really good time at Norwich. He had a fantastic time winning the league at Blackburn Rovers. But it's Celtic that he talks about. It's Celtic that there's an affinity with. I don't think he gets invited down to Chelsea nights like this that we had on a Friday night. Big John played with big clubs. He was the most expensive teenager in British football when he signed for Arsenal. He also signed for West Ham United under Harry Redknapp. He played with the Crazy Gang at Wimbledon. But it's Celtic that he has that affinity with. And I love that. I think Joe Hart will have affinities elsewhere, but I think Celtic are in his heart. And I do love that when it's people who have no connection with the football club and they actually leave having been touched by the fans and the club itself. Thanks every single person for getting involved. Well over 1,000 as we get stuck into the discussion around tonight. We started off with some memories of European victories in the past, and I'm sure they'll be popping up again. It's been 21 years since Martin O'Neill managed Celtic in Europe. You might have been at the game, nothing each against AC Milan, and I should have known that you'd be prepared for this. Can you remind me though, JP, was that the game where it felt like, in my mind's eye, it felt like every time Aidan McGeady got the ball, everybody was on the edge of their seat? Was that night?
I'm going to be honest, Paul. I genuinely I couldn't say that with any certainty. I need to watch it back. But I mean, I know I was there. I was probably well oiled. I mean, that was at a point where sherbets were had plentiful and plentiful.
Part of the match day experience. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't tend to do that as much these days. Maybe on special occasions. Had a few pints on Sunday before the game, but nothing wild. But I do remember. I do remember just. That was like, I mean, that was like we were becoming accustomed to playing clubs like AC Milan at home and maybe feeling disappointed if we didn't win. That at the end of that game, you're thinking, God, we should have beat them tonight. 0-0. We had that opportunity. We had opportunities in the game. I'm sure we did, but that's the level of kind of belief that Martin O'Neill got us to. In those 4 years. Fair enough, the away record wasn't great, and we all know that, but the home record was what saw us through a lot of the time, or maybe not saw us through, but saw us compete anyway, and possibly should have had us through, and certainly in the first season, when you get 9 points on board and you're like, surely that's enough. That was enough for so many teams to get through.
It was the magical 9. We always thought about 9 points being, like when you talk about survival points or league winning point target in the Champions League, it was always go for the 9 points and you'll get through. Really hard done by, and tough groups, JP. But I think you touched on something that you mentioned, Paddy, of a similar vintage, and I'm the same. And I think about the Celtic aspirations as a whole. So Celtic obviously played in European football before Jock Stein arrived in 1965, and there was the famous European Cup Winners' Cup run where we get to the semi-final against MTK Budapest and we win the first game 3-0. Jimmy McGrory was the manager, but we talk about changes and how Jock Stein changed everything at Celtic, including the picking of the team, because up until then it was done by committee, and Robert Kelly, the chairman of the football club, in the away leg, gave the team talk. He came into the dressing room. He told them, because there was a great crowd there, MTK Budapest, we had to go out and entertain them. We had to attack them. They were 3-0 up. They beat us 4-0. They beat us 4-0 in the semi-final of the European Cup Winners' Cup. So Jock Stein turned us into a European side. And then the aspirations of Celtic fans by the time Stein leaves the football club is that we are still a European football club, right? And Billy McNeill obviously had a run, a memorable run, right to the quarterfinals, where Real Madrid beat us in 1980, JP. And yeah, there were some moments. The Davy Hay Rapid Vienna fiasco, a lot of fans of the 80s, any in the comment section, let us know your thoughts, felt that we could have gone the whole way. Whether or not we would have beaten Everton in our final, I don't know, but we could have gone the whole way. But it was slim pickings, after the 1980 semi-final, JP, slim pickings. Martin O'Neill turned us back into a European force. So to look at the scope of what Jock Stein did when he came to Celtic on a European level, it's only comparable. I'm not saying it was the same as, it's only comparable by what Martin O'Neill did in 2000, because he turned us back into a European force, JP. Up to that point, we were nowhere in Europe.
And think of the time scale, or the timeline even of those two different periods, and how long that spans, and how long it continues to span to this day. That it's not as if there's been many moments like that. There's literally been two, and I'm really, really fortunate that I've lived through one of them. And I know that people will say, "Oh well, you failed, you didn't get there, and everything else." I got to speak to Martin O'Neill at an event, not the one at Bad, but there was one at the Armadillo.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And I got to tell him my Seville story, and it was just completely surreal standing talking to him about how I didn't have a flight until the morning of the game, and then he brought his Geraldine over. He's like, "You need to hear this," and I was showing him my ticket and everything else, and it was really, really cool to speak to him about that, and obviously Chris Sutton as well. And by the way, he did sign my 6-2 programme, so there you go. That's added his name to the 6-2.
I'm so impressed with your ability to keep things like tickets and curio, but also to get them signed. I love it, JP. Music and football.
What's the point if you don't? What's the point if you don't? Like, I've regretted not getting things signed in the past.
I've got some here.
Oh God, I could have met that guy. I could have spoke to that guy, I did speak to that guy.
Now, it's Greg Taylor who's on the front cover of that programme, but it's not Greg Taylor who signed it, right? That was signed, best wishes to my good friend, Frank McGarvey.
Oh, nice.
Right, and it was Celtic versus St Mirren, right? And I just so happened to be at the game with Frank on that particular day. and we demolished them 7-1. And I'm sure that was the game. Let me look at the date. I'm sure that was the game where Griffiths scores a hat trick, right?
Mhm.
So it's the 7th of March 2020, just before everything locked down, JP. That is, isn't it?
It wasn't 7-1. I think we won. I can't remember. I remember
I'm going to double check that.
It was a Sunday. I'll never forget it because it was the last game basically before. It was the week before we should have played Rangers at Ibrox, so it would have been, like you said, 7th of March, and it was a Sunday. Yeah, I remember. I think it was it 4 or 5 now?
I'm going to have a look at it right now. We won resoundingly. I do remember that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely did.
And
Definitely, because we were knocking everybody away in those weeks and months leading up to playing Rangers, because we shifted to the 3-5-2, and Cham was playing out of his skin. Was it 5 now?
5-0. 5-0.
And Cham was playing out of his skin. Griffiths was banging them in. Like, it was just, you had a really good feeling going into that week, and then that weekend, and then we all know what happened.
I know.
The last gig in Scotland on the Sunday the 15th happened in Aberdeen with Lewis Capaldi,
right?
And then on the Monday, we basically social distancing, and then a week later was the lockdown. So sorry to give anybody PTSD on that. But
well, that's what brought us together on this show, JP. Let's not forget. I mean, that's the positive that I can draw from it. The last gig I went to was Primal Scream, Barrowlands. Not sure what the date was, but just before lockdown. Yeah, you're right. So 5-0. But the reason I bring it up, and the reason that detail is important, is because you know how you can put a bet on. I don't bet. I couldn't even put a bet on. I've never been into betting, so excuse my naivety. But Frank put a bet on in the stadium. So you know how people come around with the betting sheets, and he put the bet on, and correct score 5-0, right? Honestly. So I think, I can't remember what it was, but I took him home after the game, and he was so chirpy, man, because he had this pocket. You know how we always dress so well, like 3-piece suit and all that, and the wee hat and everything. He looked smart as anything, and he had that pocket through Udo because we'd beaten his old team 5-0. He was delighted. I'll never ever forget that experience. So yes, I agree with you. You've got something and it's nice, but to get somebody to actually sign it, JP, I love all that.
I mean, it's a 6-2 program. I mean, that game is hallowed ground, isn't it? I mean, it's will be and will remain one of the iconic games long after you and I are gone. You know what I mean? It's that will be spoken about in kind of hushed tones. Like, oh my God,
always. I mean, in the future, I don't know how popular. They've always been popular, Celtic books, but in the future, you know, when they're looking at big games, big victories and all that, that's up there. In modern football, JP, that result, if you can describe a game by the result and everybody knows what game you're talking about, that means it's iconic. That's the 6-2 game. You know what I'm talking about when I say the 4-2 game. People know exactly what you're talking about. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, and I've mentioned it before, but I'll just say it again. My mate Ian Shaw, who was a long-suffering Celtic fan and Turficking like me in the 90s, a couple of years younger than me, but had to live through all of that nonsense in the 90s. And leading up to that game, he'd never been to a Rangers game before, and I got him a ticket. I can't remember exactly how I got it, but I got him a ticket for that game, and I said, I'll meet you at the statues after, or the statue, I think, as it was at the time. Maybe it was only one. And he comes running up to me, just like, I'd never seen him so excited in my life, and he was just full of beans, and there was many sherbets were sank that night, that's for sure. But it was amazing. It was an amazing day, and Martin O'Neill did what he said he was going to do. And I was actually looking back at the last time that Martin O'Neill played Rangers was at Ibrox. Because somebody mentioned it somewhere, so it was a 2-1 victory at Ibrox. It was the Pepperami Day, and again, was there then £29. So the 20s plenty campaign could have been applicable back then as well. But I obviously remembered the game. I mean, it's 20 years ago. It's quite mad to think that it's that, but I remember the patter was that Rangers had refused the Pepperamis because of them being green, and there were basically every other club. Now, then I read an article the other day that tried to make this out, that this maybe wasn't the case, but it certainly seemed to be the case at the time. And every club in the UK was giving out free Peperamis, but Rangers refused. So Celtic fans all brought Peperamis with them. And I remember at the point in the match where they were thrown, and it was just like hundreds and hundreds of Peperamis just flying through. It was one of the most surreal things I've ever seen. And then doing a bit of digging as well, found a back page of Rab Douglas sitting at the side of the pitch eating a
No
pepper
way.
and they had the headline Pepper Rabby.
Oh, I love it. Absolutely love it.
And then obviously Craig Bellamy scores an absolute beauty in that game and celebrates, goes down on his knees, celebrates like Peter Grant right in front of him. I don't think he blessed himself, but he had his hands over his head. And I think I've also listened to him or read him saying that when he scored that goal, he knew that he'd written himself into Celtic history because he was that much of a football nut. Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't just a case of I've just scored a goal in a game, in any other game. He was like, I've just scored against Rangers at Ibrox for Celtic. I know what this means. I know that I'm writing myself into the history books, basically. And he did. But there was another thing that I read about that game. Apparently the Rangers fans unravelled a flag or a banner before the game started that said Martin O'Neill has lost the plot. And I just thought, on reflection of that game on Sunday, I just thought, what an amazing thing to have done, to have come back and beat them in a semi-final, in a proper, big, meaningful game. You know, obviously the credit goes to the coaching staff as well, Sean Maloney, Mark Fotheringham, Gavin Strachan for the continuity from the previous regime. But, I mean, an amazing thing to have done.
Oh, unbelievable. I said yesterday, and I'll probably stand by this, I think, unless someone can tell me in the comments, someone better, I'm not sure there's anybody else who could have taken this task on the way that he has. Now, we said that about Ange, and that was with hindsight. No one else could have done what Ange did. I honestly believe that after us losing the 10, right? Everything had to be perfect. You know, the amount of players that came in, we needed most of them to hit the ground running. It happened. You know, we needed Ange. We needed that style of football, his attitude, his approach to the game. This time round, JP, we needed a certain someone after what had happened. And particularly, you know, the fact that there was obviously a huge falling out. You know, there's no denying it. The statement says that between Dermot Desmond and Brendan Rodgers, very personal. And there's not many people can actually unify the players, and we've seen that on the park, but also the support. I mean, the big thing is, and I'm going to bring this up here,
that's a key thing. That is an absolutely key thing. Like, and I don't know if Dermot Desmond has had this in his back burner for a while as a kind of, you know, break glass in emergency, you know, SOS to Martin O'Neill. I know that we mentioned it before that there was maybe some chat of, you know, the COVID season and Martin O'Neill, or potentially when Brendan Rodgers left the first time, was he considered in? But then he would have probably been in at Forest at that point, potentially. I actually meant to check that out to see if he was in employment in February 2019. But I just do wonder if it was kind of, this has always been something that he would have up his sleeve if need be, because there is nobody else that could have done this. I don't think there is nobody else that could have united the support in the way that he has done. And there, you know, reflecting on what people have said about Brendan Rodgers on the back of these last two games, I think everything that happened in the summer was just attached to Rodgers. So it was almost like if you remove Rodgers, then you're removing the constant questioning, the constant, you know, media press conferences where it's just like constantly going back to the transfer window. He's having to keep poking and poking and poking. And if you poke someone so much, they're going to snap eventually. And that's what I think the Honda Civic Ferrari comments were. That was just a case of like, we've just been jabbing at you for the last two and a half months. You're the only person that's been speaking. And then, I think once you remove him, Martin O'Neill comes in. There's no questions to Martin O'Neill about the transfer window because it's not relevant to him. He's just been tasked with the here and now and what he sees. and what he can do. It's not about there's not but then I don't know. Maybe people would disagree with that, but
no, I don't think you can, because it's removed a massive layer of the tension. It's removed that. I'm bringing this up because it doesn't absolve what has gone on before. It absolutely doesn't, right? So the Celtic Fans Collective came together, and it wasn't one or two people in a room with the same views. It wasn't an echo chamber. It was over 420 different Celtic groups, all coming together, unhappy, dissatisfied with the way the club was being run, JP. Not one result in Europe, not one transfer window, just time and time again, making the same mistakes. So that is something that continues, absolutely. But in terms of the situation with Brendan Rodgers, it was the tension. It was the constant tension and attention to the lack of recruitment. I think what we are seeing, and what we will see in the fullness of time, is that Rodgers got stuff wrong. I think that is evident when you look at, for example, a player who we'll talk about who's in the squad tonight, who wasn't in the Europa League squad, in Callum Osmond. The return of Trusty, dropping Rio Hatate, moving Callum McGregor a wee bit further. Things that we've been talking about for weeks. Not to say that we're experts, we're not. We're fans with an opinion. But it seemed as though for a long time, JP, there was a lot of this stuff happening on the park. It was clear to everybody else. And there was a tension, as if they didn't want to express themselves and click out of this mode that Brendan had them in. And they have clicked out of it. Talking about Craig Bellamy, didn't plan to speak about him today, but you brought him up, so I'm going to play this little clip. Don't know if you remember this one.
Big shout out for John Dykes for putting on a great charity event for some great causes. Well done. Keep up the good work, and hope everyone enjoys it. Take care. Bye.
There he is, John Dykes. Thank you, Craig. I mean, he has obviously been asked the question in relation to the managerial position, and did a little bit of research on Craig Bellamy. Hugely, highly rated coach. I think he's going to go into some great things. I think it's too early for him. He's obviously batted away the question as well. JP, it's interesting. He's one of these guys that he played 15 games of football for Celtic, all under Martin O'Neill. And after that season, when Martin leaves, I remember reading this in Gordon Strachan's book that he wrote. I think it was post-Celtic, actually, post-Celtic manager, or maybe during his time as manager. It's up there somewhere. And I asked him about it, actually, when we did a couple of live events with Gordon. And it was about keeping Craig Bellamy as a player. Because, he was one of the guys that came to the club for a short period of time. But everybody talks about, waxes lyrical about Craig Bellamy because, he made a really big impact in a season where we actually lost the league. And we went on, obviously, to win the cup against Dundee United. Chris Sutton missed a penalty, and Chris Sutton was not happy when someone asked him to sign a copy of the Celtic jersey recently, that the picture that was in the book next to his jersey was him falling on his backside in that cup final when he took the penalty. But Craig Bellamy is one of the guys. He's a bit of a fan's favourite, bizarrely, for only being a lone player over 15 games. He's crafted himself out a career in coaching, very highly respected, part of Vincent Kompany's kind of backroom team, and he's now out there on his own, and he's got this ambition, this burning ambition to take Wales to the World Cup finals, which will hold him back from even thinking about it. It's not on his radar, he says. I'm fine with that. I think maybe at some point in the future he is a Celtic manager, but it's too early for him, if you ask me, JP.
I mean, I can't confess to have a great knowledge of what he's done in terms of coaching. I haven't really been keeping an eye. It's no surprise that anyone with a Celtic connection and who has maybe considered a rising star in the world of coaching will get linked with the job. Interesting comments from Mark Goody the other day, just saying that considering how close he is to Martin O'Neill, he's dropped McKenna and Knutson or Knutson as the favoured two. So I don't know if he's got any inside knowledge that he's decided to share to make himself look good when it actually happens.
He hasn't, because was he speaking on Go Radio, Mark?
Yeah, I think so.
He's normally on point. I do think he's got some good contacts.
Well, I mean, just going back to the whole what has happened in the last week, there's been quite a few things have happened in terms of magically somebody has an idea for what to do with the banners. Has that got something to do with Dermot Desmond coming back to Celtic Park last week and being there and sort of going, What's going on here?
They've got a point. I mean, look at the state of the place. I think so.
You could never say that for certainty. The Celtic fan survey results come out. You know, I mean, you're almost stopping short of him going, "Where's this hotel you've been talking about?" And there's not supposed to be a museum here as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then even more miraculously, I'm thinking things like, you know, does Dolberg suddenly turn up on our doorstep? You know, having been bought out of his Ajax contract.
Can I just say, the other day there, when I made this point, Drew in the comments said, "Oh, look, they're trying to take credit for all these things." We're not trying to take credit for anything. These things are obvious to anybody that walks up to Celtic Park. They need to be done. They absolutely need to be done. And let's be honest, JP, the survey results, right? The banners and the same, low-hanging fruit, easily solved. You know, just tiny wee things. They're not the big things that we're complaining about in terms of behind the scenes.
Not exactly. And why should it take, you know, a bunch of us to get together to sort of all finger point and go, look, this is not good enough. But it's exactly the same as what we're doing about the recruitment process as well, because you were on that BBC podcast with Killian Sheridan and Ray Bradshaw yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, yesterday morning.
And it was interesting listen, and then it got to the point of like Killian Sheridan talking about, you know, I think, you know, maybe the plan there was to, you know, get past Kairat with what you had, and then look to recruit. You only had 3 days after that second leg. What on earth does he expect to happen in those 3 days? Miraculously, Maeda goes, Yang goes, we sign 5 players or 6 players. And when have Celtic ever been as efficient in that in the transfer window? Why not, instead of leaving it to the last minute, get your recruitment done early, make it absolutely sure of getting past Kairat, and then you've got players embedded and they've been there for a couple of weeks, they've been there for a month maybe, ahead of the Champions League proper starting itself, and they've got to know their teammates' names, and they're not in a hotel, you know, they've got a place. All these things don't just happen at the drop of a hat. I mean, I met Tenecte and he was in the Blytheswood Hotel. He'd been there for a week, I think, at that point. So do you not think it would have been better for Tenecte in terms of settling in Glasgow if he'd been in Glasgow
absolutely
before, and then in a flat in Glasgow's leafy West End? I mean,
there's default responses to all these things, JP. Oh, you know, but it's difficult. It's difficult to do transfers. And you think to yourself, you make it difficult. You make things difficult. The thing with regards to Celtic and recruitment, and it's the same every club, JP, it doesn't start the day the window opens. It's an all-year-round job. Get everything lined up. This is probably my only concern in relation to a manager, because on the one hand, I don't want anybody rushed. I don't want a rushed appointment. And I think, yeah, it was only 2 games, and who knows what's going to happen tonight. We'll get on to that. But it seems as though we've got a safe pair of hands with Martin O'Neill at the moment. So hopefully that can continue until such times as we get our right man. But what if that is only post or into January, you know? And then you're thinking to yourself, right, now we've had players foisted on the last manager. It was clearly an issue first time round. It's been an issue second time round, JP, with regards to recruitment. We don't want to repeat that. We want whoever the manager's going to be a massive part in the January recruitment. On the other hand, I also know we're not going to buy 5 players in January. That ain't happening. I mean, at the very, very most, you're probably looking at 3 at the most. I'm expecting 2. Mm-hmm. But there may also be departures. You want the manager to come in and be part of that decision-making process, because it's his team for the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm. No, I know. That is the concern when you're appointing a manager midway through the season, where things are already up and running. Have things been put in place prior to a new manager coming in terms of signings for January? I mean, what if there's deals lined up that then the manager looks at them and goes, well, actually, I don't think this is a good idea. I'd rather, if I was going for this type of player, I would go for him instead. Or I know this player from my former club that's been looking to move for a while. I could get him for you. All that sort of stuff. Like, doors open when you get a new guy in because he's got fresh connections, new ideas, all the rest of it. So yeah, I have that concern. From a selfish point of view, I can't go to the game on Sunday, and I'm genuinely gutted, and it's because of the fact that we're in the Europa League and not the Champions League. So I've again got a diary in front of me and it's got Champions League scored out, Europa League next to it, and then the game obviously on Saturday should have been on Saturday against Kilmarnock. We should have been playing Kilmarnock at home on Saturday. The game was moved to the Sunday to accommodate the Europa League. But they didn't think about me. I'm joking, of course, but I'd put myself down to work a gig with a really, really great band called Nation of Language, by the way. There's still tickets left. They're playing SWG3 on Sunday, but that rules me out of going to the game. So I gave him a ticket to Mark that sits in front of me so he could take his wee boy. So I really, really hope that isn't the last Martin O'Neill game on Sunday from a selfish point of view, because I've already heard other podcasts talking about, if it does come out that will be his last game ahead of the international break, then, that's quite a moment to not be at, in terms of if it's a see you later, just because I was just thinking about it as well, like the fact that Martin O'Neill lost the league in his last season. And he never really goes on about that unless you can tell me differently from the nights that you've done with him. He obviously does hang on to the Seville result. He'll never mention that without, he'll praise them and he'll say, they went on to win the Champions League the following season, but he'll always sort of mention the play acting and whatnot and the time wasting and everything else. So that definitely sticks in his throat. And I would imagine that not winning the league in that last season will also stick in his throat. And to have held on to that for 20 years and then get an opportunity to play them, admittedly in a different competition, but to get that, I mean, that must have been, I can only imagine how satisfying his glass of red on Sunday night must have been, you know what I mean? After that, if he allowed himself one, I mean, the guy must be mentally and physically exhausted after having to do press conferences.
Oh yeah,
the traveling. I'm sorry, but say what you like, but at 73, there's times that my age traveling can seem relentless. Whether if you're on tour or something like that, and you're going from one country to the next, and sometimes you just want your bed, even if you're having a good time, and I'm sure he is having a good time. But I mean, can you imagine at 73 doing all that? He had to go all the way back down to London to get his passport because he'd forgotten it, so that he could go to Denmark tonight. Like that's extra hassle.
I've spoken to you about this before in terms of the music world, but football and modern football in particular, where there is so much travel, if you want to bring in the European aspect of it, because we're playing more and more games, and not because we're getting into the latter stages. I mean, we had 10 games last season. Even if we don't qualify out of the Europa League stage this season, we will have played 10 games because we had 2 qualifiers. So there's loads of travel, and then you've got the international thing. And I've said to players, I remember saying to Paddy McCourt about the travelling, we never think about that. And what I would say about that is yesterday during the press conference, there was a moment where O'Neill had kind of phased out. He wasn't sleeping, but he was just like sitting there and he'd phased out.
I think he thought they were still talking to Kasper Schmeichel.
Kasper, yeah.
But then as soon as he got the question, he was just like, he was on it.
Sharp.
I mean, he can be acute. You can forgive him for that.
Exactly.
Because I mean, my God, like to have gone from his day to day being what it was to suddenly being the manager of Celtic again, I mean, absolute hats off to him, like for being able to take it on, because it's a unique situation and he's a unique man.
I love the fact that he said I was given 10 minutes, apparently. I just thought to myself, brilliant. Martin O'Neill given 10 minutes to make a decision.
Yeah.
But no, you made a point earlier on in relation to where was he in the February of 2019. He was at Nottingham Forest. He'd just been given the job in January, JP. So there's a sliding doors moment for you, if ever there was one, right? Going to bring in a few comments coming in from the commenters. Thank you, every single one. 1,800 strong watching right now. But before I do that, I'm going to share a screen. Something very interesting has happened. Just today, I saw this on Twitter. I'm going to share it with you guys. So obviously, what's brought to light during the Celtic Fans Collective is just how many associations and affiliations of supporters clubs there actually are, JP. And it's fantastic that we've got representation in Ireland and obviously in America. And today, this is the Bilbao Boys CSC on Twitter. X, and they have announced on today's date, today being the 138th anniversary of the club, of course, we are proud to be an affiliated member of a new European association of Celtic supporters. I think this is fantastic. So if you look at all the associations and affiliations outside Scotland, England, Ireland, and America, you could have had a CSC. We've visited a Romanian CSC. I mean, they didn't have an affiliation or association they could attach themselves to, JP. Now they do. So I think that's fantastic. And there'll be a lot of work going on in the background to get that set up. So fair play to everybody who's involved. And of course, if you're part of a European CSC, get onto Twitter. All the information's on there as to how you can apply to become a member. So fantastic work. Well done to everybody involved. Scottish bike adventurer. Afternoon pot pickers. What's the music news today? Music news today, JP, you were talking about a gig you were doing this weekend, weren't you? The news today, in terms of the music, the only music news that I want to speak about today is Snoop Dogg once again. It's like he's got a hotline to talk about the fact that he's dying to give this football club money. And I don't think the club ever responds to his pleas. He was in again. He wants Ange Postecoglou to be in charge. Phenomenal. Right, McLaughlin P. Did Bobo know half Sutton and 2? He did. And Chris Sutton spoke about that on Friday night. The other music news, of course, JP, is that you and I actually met Liam Gallagher on Friday night in Greenock. Liam Gallagher, yeah, we met him in Greenock. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And if you weren't there, you'll never know. Did Bobo know half Sutton and 2? He did. It was in the game leading up to, I think, the Liverpool game away at Anfield, and he broke Chris Sutton's wrist. So Bobo Baldé was the reason that Chris Sutton couldn't play in that game. Will McMillan, think we were the first team to get 9 points and not qualify. Wouldn't surprise me. It was a brilliant feat, and we didn't get through. And we've also got James Kerwin. 2005, when we lost the league on the last day of the season, was that the catalyst that pushed Martin to leave? If we had won that day, do you think he would have stayed on? The reason he leaves is due to the health of his wife at the time. He had to leave to be with his wife and spend more time with her. Geraldine, I think you.
Yeah, and he said as well that he would have stayed at Celtic longer, I think, if he hadn't had to do that. So, I mean, it was a horrible way for it to end. I mean, I know it didn't end with the league; he won the Scottish Cup, but yeah, that was a sickener. That was a real sickener, and. A lot of those big moments where you lose things like that, like Seville, like cup finals, the Lovencrans Cup final, the league on the last day, those things, they stay with you, and that's why you never ever take things like Sunday for granted. I mean, that I had good vibes about going into the game on Sunday because I was we'd arranged to get the tickets together, myself, Melly, his girlfriend Lisa, and Gilly. And by the way, the first thing Gilly said to me when he seen me on Sunday was, "Shackles, praise you." That's a tune, by the way. He was like, "Hey," and then I listened to it and I was like, "Oh, of course I know this tune." It's a total one-hit wonder. I thought it might have had something to do with Fatboy Slim, but it's not that. It's not that at all. It was a one-hit wonder of the year 2000. But no, we'd sat together at the Ange Hibs League Cup final, which is still one of my favourite Hampden games and will always be one of my favourite Hampden games.
I just think smoke. See, when you bring it up, I'm just thinking smoke in the air.
Yeah, but I think there's something to be said for when you sit together, because quite often when you get a ticket for a cup final or a semi-final at Hampden, you just take what you can get and you're sitting on your own and you're not with people that you know or whatever. But when you're sitting in a row with, 4 or 5 people that you know, it kind of, you've got a bit of reassurance there almost, because I was on my own at the cup final in May when we lost to Aberdeen, and it felt a very, very lonely place. I was away up looking down on the Aberdeen fans in that south stand, and I think I've spoke about it before, but it was a horrible experience. I mean, happy enough for my mate James is an Aberdeen fan, but I think my happiness stopped at him, really. I can't say I was delighted for the rest of them, but it's interesting how your mindset changes depending on who you're with at a game. I think maybe other people might subscribe to that. I don't know.
I would say so. I'm going to bring your Scottish Cup final memories into the next part of the discussion here tonight, because we're in Denmark, of course. Stu Scotland says, and is that, who's that in his avatar? Respect to our rivals, may the best team win. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stu. Thank you for that.
I mean, see that, going back to that Hearts game at Tynecastle, we just won 2-1 against Sturm Graz, who are the Austrian champions, and we arguably could have beaten them by a lot more that night. Brendan Rodgers was still the manager.
Yeah.
That Hearts game, Negren scores that goal, which he should have done to put us 2-1 up. Is there a different result in that game? Because there's a lot of people who are sort of saying, oh, the players that he'd lost the dressing room, the players that stopped playing for him. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think
they were demoralised. I think they were demoralised rather than down in tools, JP.
Yeah.
I think it was really doing energy. Energy is massive in football and momentum. And sometimes, and Hearts are seeing this a wee bit now. I'm not saying it's luck. I'm saying it's momentum and energy. A lot of things are going for them. And that often happens when you're on the cusp of that. But they didn't seem to be falling for us. And I do think that the dressing room seemed demoralised. I wasn't in it. I'm talking about the flatness of the performances, JP. That's been lifted in the last 10 days.
I don't necessarily think that were we to be playing Hearts at Tynecastle on Sunday, I wouldn't be going into that game thinking, oh, we're going to go there and win 2-3-0, because Hearts are still well in this and they've been playing well and they've got the momentum, like you said. So this is a title race. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And I wince a bit. I really hope Patrick McGilp does eventually concede that Hearts are genuine contenders, because every time he says, they'll fall away, I'm just like, didn't he say that, man?
I think we're in. I mentioned that the conversation you referenced earlier. I mentioned Love Street 86. We were chasing Hearts. That season for a long time.
And don't get me wrong, I hope he's right, but I hope he's right. But hearing them dismissed like that, I think that can come back to bite us. I think you've got to take them seriously. You've got to take them seriously until they're in our rear view mirror, and they're not right now.
And that's another reason why we are appointing a permanent manager in season. The last time that we had a departure during a season was, of course, when Neil Lennon left in the fabled 10 in a row season it never was, and we just let it roll to the end of the campaign. So I think we realised that in order for us to actually win this league, JP, we need a turnaround. We've had an idea or a vision of what the squad can do. There might be a few little nuggets in there that we hadn't tapped into, but Casper Schmeichel, you brought up the Scottish Cup final. A lot of Celtic fans on our comment section, some of the contributors, Lawrence Conley, have been saying Sinisalo should be in goals for us. I think Schmeichel was brilliant on Sunday. I think he played really, really well. Obviously, he plays against one of his former clubs, against Falkirk. People forget that he was at Falkirk with Big Yogi Hughes, John Hughes II, I think we can call him. But we look at him tonight going over to Denmark. Obviously, he was a feature of the pre-match press conferences, etc. And he spoke about the departure of Rodgers, and he called it a horrible experience. So it just shows you that footballers have been affected by this as well at Celtic. And we go back to the job that Martin has done. He's had to bring them all together. And hopefully, go right into that next game, because this all happened on the Monday night. We've got a game on the Wednesday. He barely knows some of the guys. He admitted to that. So that actually being one of the examples. Yet he's getting a tune out of this team that did seem demoralised and flat. Tonight's different in terms of the opposition, the occasion, the destination, and Midtjylland are doing well. I mean, they're sitting second in the league at the moment. They've started off really well.
Drew one each on Monday night.
Yeah.
At home to Aarhus, I think it was.
They're at top of the league, aren't they?
Yeah.
AGF Aarhus. I mean, we met them actually when Davy Hay was in charge. We played them in that season that we ended up playing Rapid Vienna, I believe. So, yeah, it's a right good side. Martin O'Neill spoke about that as well. It's a really big challenge. He also spoke about the fact there might be some changes in the team. What do you expect us to do? Do you just expect personnel changes, or are we approaching this differently?
I think, given Martin O'Neill's experience in European competition, I mean, he's lifted that big cup twice, so I think he can draw on that.
It's incredible when you think about that.
I mean, I know that we're in a modern era and everything's changed and all the rest of it, and you can be flippant about the fact that the players in the dressing room are young guys who won't have any knowledge of him as a manager, potentially, never mind as a player. I mean, I don't have any knowledge of him as a player, but the shivers went down my spine when he told that story about John Robertson and getting the nod to, or basically being the master of his own destiny, and whether or not he played in that game, and then he scores a goal that takes them to the European Cup final after losing his sister or his brother. His brother, yeah. I mean, that's that's amazing. There's all sorts of nuggets that Martin O'Neill can draw on to inspire this team tonight. Obviously, we're well aware we're coming up against a good side. A good side that Hibs ran close, though, if you remember, in July. And that they're at a far later stage in their season than us, aren't they? They're well into their season. I don't actually know when the Danish season ends, but it's not as if they were caught cold by Hibs or anything like that. They were still firmly into their season at that point. So you obviously go into it with concerns. It might be a challenge too far, but I'm certainly not. I'm not scared of it. I'm not going to be watching it. From
behind two couches.
Behind two couches. No, absolutely not. I'm excited to see what he's done in the preparation and what the coaches have done in preparation that lead us into this game, to see where it can take us, because there was a snap to the team on Sunday that hadn't really been there for I say for a while. I still reference the Sturm Graz game as being like, I'm not just going to, the Dundee game was horrendous. I was there. It was horrendous. It was a real low, a real nadir. That to me was the peak of everything, the peak of the malaise around the club, the balls on the pitch, the disgruntlement between fans over whether that was a good idea or not, the comments from William Scales that did or did not suggest that it had affected the team, that the negative energy had affected the team, misinterpreted or not. But the Sturm Graz game, the players were alive in that game. They were. I'm not just having selective amnesia and just forgetting about that game. So that was in the same competition. So they're obviously aware that this is an important competition, regardless of the fact that we're no longer in the Champions League. We've got 4 points on the board. We're not sitting pointless at the bottom of the table. We've got a fighting chance. Yes, we've got difficult fixtures on the horizon, Roma, Bologna, all the rest of it. But I would be going into this thinking, there's something to be got from this game.
I'd love to take something from it. I think who knows what's going to happen here. It's the same competition under a different guise that obviously we reached the final under Martin O'Neill in 2003. I remember going through that season and there was a big deal made of the fact that all the teams had a V in it. We were looking for any sign. And then the final was in Seville. So the V continued. Any signs at all that we could win this trophy. And we might look back on that Sturm Graz game and say, look how important that win was to this campaign, JP.
Yeah, I mean, would Tierney be considered as a change in tactic if you're bringing Tierney in instead of Sirachi? I don't know if there's maybe been a long game thinking on that, because all great managers are looking at the snooker moves, the snooker play, aren't they? They're looking at what shot do I play next, because it wasn't just all about Sunday and not thinking about Thursday. There must have been some consideration for Thursday on in terms of Sunday's team. So, do
you think we'll play the 4-2-3-1? That's what it looked like to me at the weekend. 4-2-3-1. Is that how we're going to play it, do you think?
I mean, we sat here and we've sat here for ages going, he needs to figure out, like Brendan Rodgers needs to figure out how to get this midfield ticking. Yeah. And the middle three, that's the key to unlocking everything else. Because if you get that right, then we've got wingers. We might not have a natural right winger in terms of somebody that we would be starting guaranteed every week, in the same way that Tenecti started pretty much every game on the left since he signed. But it just opens up everything else, doesn't it, if you get that right? And the balance did seem right on Sunday. Just watching what little I did of the first half back, I watched like the first half an hour back there, and it just felt like everything was plugged in correctly, as opposed to there being any, wires missing or anything like that. It just felt like there was I thought Negren played really well on Sunday. I thought, he wasn't outstanding, but he fitted into what was expected of him, I think. And Engels, obviously, I've heard people say Engels was the best man in the park. I think Engels was up there for man of the match contender. A lot of people say Tenecti's first half performance was great. It was good, very good. I don't think it was great. I think we could have done better with that shot. Definitely could have killed the bobble and then just wrapped into whatever corner he chose. But yeah, I thought the balance in the midfield, I don't know much about tactics. I've never ever confessed on this that I do know much about tactics, but it felt right. It felt comfortable, and Callum McGregor felt comfortable as well. And if you've got Callum McGregor in a comfortable position, then he's able to do things like he did, like score that goal.
Well, JP, you're talking about tactics there. It may be that, fans watch football games and are very much observers of the game. That's what I do. I watch as an observer. So what I can say is that there's been a problem in that midfield. Those that know tactics could maybe tell you how to sort that problem. That's all. That's the difference. But to identify that that's been a problem all season, I think absolutely you're spot on. What went right at the weekend is that all three of them were playing in their correct roles. It was almost as if they were all playing their incorrect roles, or roles in which they were less effective right up until that point. Andy Engels, a player I've stood up for and got a right good slagging, and bring it on. That's what it's all about. I stood up for him and championed him because there is, to use a cliche, definitely a quality player there. I just never ever thought we figured out where to play him. Callum McGregor, we were going on and on about having some kind of a freedom to get up into the final third. Nygren's never a right winger. He said that himself in the press conference, or even a right-sided midfielder in the 2-8s that we continually played, Nygren on the right, Hatate on the left. That just wasn't working, JP.
But you've removed somebody from the equation who doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't have the same appetite for playing the game in Scotland anyway, or certainly playing for Celtic and Reo Hatate. I just think, I don't know where his head's at, but I've not seen any evidence this season to suggest that he's in this fight with us. Negren hasn't won anything for Celtic yet. He's not lifted one of the big shiny things that everybody else has lifted a lot of times. So he's got that in his sights, because he knows that if he does want to progress in his career, which I'm sure he does, I'm not thinking that Negren's going to be a lifer at Celtic or anything like that, but he knows that if he wants to progress and get another move 2 years down the line, as the usual chat is, the Nicholas Kuhn chat that we know happened, he admitted in that interview there's a 2-year plan usually, and he went a little bit early, but that's the usual plan. So he knows he needs to get his numbers good and win trophies. And that's the hunger that he has. Engels, although he's been here a season and has won 2 trophies, there's 1 trophy he's lost out on. So he's got the hurt from that. But he's also knows that he's got a lot of people to prove wrong, and a lot of people to prove right as well, because he's divided the support so much. There's people that were so vociferous in their criticism of Arne Engels. Read it so many comments where you'd expect them the next stage and their assumption of him is to be crucified. It's just like the guy can't do anything right. And again, it's probably because of the price tag. Everyone that follows him around, so he's got that motivation. And then you've got Callum McGregor, who has also been written off.
Yeah.
But Callum McGregor, I don't think Callum McGregor's commitment can ever be questioned. But then if that is the right three, then you've got a combination of attitude and hunger and skill that can really affect the rest of the team. And if they're, I mean, it doesn't get called the engine room for a laugh. Do you know what I mean? The engine room is generally where things power the rest of a machine. Yep. So that if you've got that right, and it did feel like we had that right on Sunday, despite, you know, Rangers got back into it, and obviously they got the penalty, which pushed us into extra time, which I don't think anybody really wanted or expected, especially after them losing a man. And that penalty, by the way, I'm not having that as a penalty. I really am.
It's never a penalty, JP.
I mean, I got a text from a really staunch Rangers fan who was annoying me because he was texting me after every single incident going, definitely a red after Asgard, and then Trusty should have been a red. Never an offside for Maeda. He called that as well. So I'm getting these texts and then showing them to Melly, and he's like, he's at the wind-up. Like, he's winding you up. But everything he said to me, I kind of agree with. I mean, that's outrageous to have a goal disallowed for that. Outrageous.
The frustration for me, JP, and I said it all week, is it's the wrong frame. Mm-hmm. This is the ball leaving Nygren's boot. That needs to be the frame. Mm-hmm. But again, also the lines that are being used on our system are too thick. They're too thick. They need to be. I mean, I keep saying it, either use the best system or don't use it at all.
Neil Buchanan drew those lines in 1995. I mean, it's a bit that, isn't it? It's not far off it, but I think there was enough about that midfield on Sunday, despite the things that went against us that led to extra time. We should have been out of sight. And you know, a word for Callum Osmond. What an amazing moment for that boy, and Kenny as well. I mean, Kenny scored that header like a Chris Sutton header. That was a proper Chris Sutton header. He would have been.
It was, by the way. And I'm glad you brought up Osmond, right? Because there's loads of great comments. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. We're almost 2,000 live here. But someone has asked a very pertinent question. I'm going to bring this up. Here we go. So, in the heat, 67, where are the AI images? What we're actually doing in the heat, it's not just going to be AI images, it's going to be a CGI video of the vision of Paradise. It's going to take a wee while to get right. I've actually got another meeting where I'll be speaking to the person who's going to produce that video for us tomorrow. So we will get it done and it will look spectacular, and we'll share it as soon as it's finished. Any feedback on our Not Another Penny campaign? What I would say to this is that you may have noticed, and I don't know if this was by design or by luck, that the club invited all the fan media up to the store, up to the shop for an event whereby they were opening the store. It was the official opening. Johnny Kenny, Callum Osmond, and I think I've seen on the footage, Tenecki was there as well. But obviously, it would have been the wrong decision for Acsom to be there due to the campaign that's just been brought up there. So we didn't send any contributors to that event. So I don't know, as I say, if it was by design or just by absolute chance that the club did it, but they certainly mentioned that fan media was there on the video, which I found quite surprising. They highlighted the fact that fan media were in attendance. So yeah, we did not send anybody to that because I don't think that would have been in the spirit of the campaign. The campaign is alive and well, so just keep checking on their status online. And if you're a shareholder and you're wondering what's happening with regards to the AGM, also check out the Celtic Trust, because they've organised a drop-in session at Gracie's coming up to the Trust. There's a lot of questions because people, JP, have bought shares and they've never been active shareholders, if you like. You just wanted to buy the shares and help the club. Many of whom did that back in 95. So if there's any questions, etc., there's going to be a drop-in session with the Celtic Trust. Go and check all that out on the socials as well. An hour and 4 minutes in, JP, it's always an absolute pleasure. I'm delighted to see that you've got the vintage O'Neill's treble flag up behind you on the shelf. Absolutely love that stuff. Just stuff. I love all that stuff. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. If you want to see us live, then why not come along to the Scott Brown event? There's maybe 20, maybe under 20 tickets left. The link is underneath this video. Thanks, everybody. 2,000 of you for tuning in and join us again tonight, 30 minutes before kickoff on A Celtic State of Mind.